Hello, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. It is another rainy day here in Portland, Oregon, and as long as it's not great gardening weather, I thought I would take the opportunity to hunker down inside a little bit and discuss an important topic that came up in a permaculture group where I am an admin. Now, the question was posited, is there a place for billionaires in a permaculture system? To be honest, actually, the question is more like, in a permaculture system, is it appropriate to eat the rich? And I think that that's a really touchy, obviously, really, that's going to be a controversial thing to talk about. But I think it's really a good thought exercise for us to engage in. What does permaculture design, what does truly resilient living have to say about the whole concept of a billionaire to begin with? So before we dive into what permaculture design has to say about the accumulation of vast quantities of resources, I think it's important that we look at what exactly does $1 billion look like? What is the difference between a billionaire and a millionaire and the rest of us? I think that's so important because folks can fall into this kind of fallacious thinking that they are just one step away from achieving the American dream of becoming a billionaire themselves. They think that if I have $100,000 in my IRA, that I'm practically on my way to being a billionaire. Or maybe they fantasize about the notion, what would it be like to be a billionaire? What would my life be like? I want to emulate that, where I have a life of leisure and luxury. So it can be really easy, especially if you are kind of in a more comfortable segment of modern society, where you're perhaps middle class, upper middle class, to think that you are one step away from a billionaire, or 2 or 3 steps away, but you're just like, it's achievable for you. You might get there. That's a fallacy. You might get to $1 million. In fact, in America, to have a comfortable retirement, a lot of folks have close to $1 million by the time they hit retirement age. That's actually not that much money in a modern system where the cost of living is very high. Obviously, I'm nowhere near there, but just to say that like a millionaire, sure, 200 years ago, that was a lot of money. That was high status. But a millionaire is nothing close to a billionaire in terms of resource accumulation. So when we are looking at billionaires, I think it can be tempting, and I see it in social media all the time, folks who are willing to kind of stand for billionaires, right? Who are willing to shill for billionaires, who are willing to get up and say, I will bulldog for billionaires all day long, not understanding that billionaires are the reason that the rest of us, part of the reason, the rest of us are less secure financially, and that we have been exploited by anybody who has $1 billion. So let's not fall into the false way of thinking. Let's not fall into the trap of believing that billionaires are anything like the rest of us, or that we are in any way on the cusp of reaching that level of financial accumulation. So what does permaculture have to say about billionaires? First, let's look at what does permaculture have to say about money in general. Money is a useful system. Money itself is not necessarily evil. How money is utilized and how resources are distributed is something that permaculture addresses. So permaculture, a design system for helping create sustainable and regenerative ways of living for people and ecosystems, originally began with 3 ethics. They were earth care, people care, and set limits to population and consumption. Bet you thought I was going to say share the surplus or fair share. So limits to population and consumption kind of went over like a lead balloon, and as time went on, it got massaged a little bit into the nice little rhyme, earth care, people care, fair share. But what does fair share actually mean? I have a video on it. It's a very contentious ethic, and people like to forget about it. And they like to focus on the earth care and the gardening and the self-sufficiency aspects of permaculture, when really the 3rd ethic of permaculture is pretty darn radical, especially in a consumptive consumer society. And I think a lot of people come to permaculture because they're interested in prepping, they're interested in self-sufficiency movements, and so they're drawn to this whole notion of ecological gardening, of growing more of your own food, of healing the land so that it can be optimally productive. Permaculture is not prepping, and I think both in this channel and kind of in my admin work on social media and permaculture groups, I tend to alienate people who come to permaculture with a very kind of libertarian, right-wing agenda and a view of the world that very much has to do with kind of self-sufficiency, homesteader prepping. because that is not what permaculture is. There are aspects of permaculture that you can draw from if you are a prepper. And I don't want to say that permaculture excludes preppers, but I do want to say that the pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of individualistic notion of living, the kind of self-sufficiency notion, the kind of I'm preparing for the zombie apocalypse and I have, 50-gallon drums of wheat berries in my garage notion of prepping is not permaculture. When the spit hits the fan, I will be holed up with my guns and my resources and I can take care of myself without society. That is not permaculture. So you may live that kind of model and that may be a philosophy that's really appealing to you. I hope that there are things from this channel that you can learn about and that you can draw from and are of a benefit to you, but that is not permaculture. The third ethic of permaculture is fair share. It is set limits to consumption. The third ethic is about carrying capacity. What is the load that the system can handle? So do permaculture systems that are designed for resilience, have a place for folks who are billionaires, folks who hoard obscene quantities of resources far beyond what they can ever consume in a lifetime? To me, the answer is really obvious. No, there's no place for them in permaculture. A truly resilient system would not have billionaires. A lot of folks who are interested in permaculture are hardcore stands for capitalism, hardcore stands for a free market economy, hardcore proponents of deregulation. And so when I say things like permaculture shouldn't have billionaires, folks get their hackles up real quick. Now, if you'd asked me 20 years ago about my ideological and political persuasions, I would have said I'm a permaculturist and I'm a libertarian, because I was in my 20s and because I really loved the notion of folks governing themselves. I went to a college with self-governance. I highly prize my autonomy. I highly prize having the freedom to make decisions about what I do with my property, with my body, with my life. But over the years, I have realized not everybody has earth care and people care in mind. Someone who is accumulating billions of dollars does not have earth care and people care in mind. They have hoarding of resources in mind. And I will tell you, there's tons out there, and I am not an economics expert, but there is tons out there about how billionaires come to be billionaires. And I guarantee you it is not through ethical living. Often it is starting off with inherited wealth. So you have generational wealth. It is about exploiting the planet, exploiting economic systems, exploiting workers. That's how you get rich. That's how you create an obscene amount of wealth. $1 billion is an obscene amount of wealth. Please don't argue with me that it's not, because it really is. Anybody who is holding on to that kind of money that they cannot spend within their lifetime is not living out a permaculture system. And I know folks would say, like, what does Bill Mollison have to say about this? I bet that he would say, let people do the best that they can and let them reap the benefits, let them reap the yields. A permaculture principle obtain a yield. Let them reap the yields of their labor. Again, I would encourage you to look up how billionaires become billionaires, because they do it by exploiting the system and not paying their fair share of taxes and by getting all kinds of perks and benefits that are not available to the rest of us. So they game the system. Sure, people have lots of ingenuity, and I'm not saying billionaires don't work to get where they're at. I'm saying that the ethics of it is very complicated. And first of all, I am not a Mollison originalist. I think that permaculture is an evolving movement. It's an evolving philosophy. It's adaptive. We learn, we gain new information, we adapt the system in order to function more optimally. But there is one quote from Mollison that every time somebody tells me that Mollison would have wanted a free market economy, that he would have wanted folks to keep whatever it is that they produce, I would like to share my favorite Bill Mollison quote with you all. To accumulate wealth, power, or land beyond one's needs in a limited world is to be truly immoral. Be it as an individual, as an institution, or a nation state. I think those words from Bill Mollison really sum up how permaculture would view billionaires. It's immoral to accumulate resources beyond one's own needs in a limited world. And we live in a really limited world right now where folks are exploited. Folks don't have the ability to meet their own basic needs because of all kinds of systemic injustices and lack of opportunity. We live in a world where ecosystems are rapidly being depleted when we could conserve them, where the wealthiest few on the planet, the oligarchs, the billionaires, the obscenely rich, could be actively working to heal those spaces, and they don't. They sit on their big giant nest egg like a dragon with their wings spread out, snoozing on their hoard of gold. So forgive me for getting a tiny bit controversial and political in this video, but I really wanted to speak to that notion that anybody who actively dives into what permaculture has to say could think that permaculture would justify the existence of billionaires. Permaculture is about earth care, people care, fair share. It is about healing depleted landscapes. It is about raising the quality of life for all people, not just those at the very top. If those at the bottom are suffering, if we have poverty in the world, if we have landscapes that are being used in such a way that their fertility is decreasing instead of increasing, we don't have good permaculture design, and we need to redesign and do better. So the fact that we live in a world where we have folks who are being exploited, where we have landscapes and ecosystems that are being stripped, tells us that we have not designed for resilience. And that's a world where billionaires exist, and they have gotten much richer in the pandemic. And the folks at the very top continue to hoard hundreds of billions of dollars. That is a big indicator to us that we don't have resilient design, and that those folks, we need a redesign. Those folks perhaps need to have limits set to their consumption. Thank you for watching today. I am sure I'm going to get a lot of angry comments, and that's okay. I appreciate you sharing your opinion, even if we don't always agree. I don't expect folks to always agree with my viewpoint here. In fact, I've been frustrated lately where folks see me say one thing in a video that they don't like or they don't agree with, and so I'm going to unsubscribe. I'm flouncing right now from this channel. I would encourage you to stay and exist in that tension, even if we don't agree on everything. I don't want my life to be an echo chamber of people just like me, and I would hope that you wouldn't either. I would hope that we can still glean valuable things from each other, even if we don't see eye to eye on every issue. In fact, I think that kind of diversity of thinking is crucially important in permaculture. I think it's crucially important that we don't just hang out with people who are exactly like us, and that when someone says something that we don't like, that we don't have a giant flounce and say, I can't be around anything like that. I'm going to discount everything you say because I didn't like this one point that you made. So if you have an opinion that differs from mine, I would love to hear it in the comments. Probably not going to come around to your way of thinking, but you never know. I might. I've been persuaded in the comment section before. In the meantime, please check out my Patreon. That is a great way that you can support the work of this channel and that you can help me keep creating educational content about resilient design. The folks who contribute to my Patreon are the folks who keep the work of this channel going. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. I'll be back soon from outdoors in my garden. Thanks.